For this lesson, we're going to cover Photoshop Classroom in a Book, Chapter 5, which is all about quick fixes. In this chapter, you're going to cover quite a few different things and end up working on, I think it's 5 or so different files. Alright, so let's go ahead and go to Photoshop Classroom in a Book on Canvas. You're going to go ahead, download that zip file. I've already downloaded it to the desktop. I'm going to go ahead, right-click, extract all. Now, once you've got it extracted, go ahead and open it up. You'll see that there's quite a few different elements in here. We've got bridges and columns, ducks. We're not going to worry about the extra credit, the glass, the red eye. So we're working on quite a few different things in this project. So one of the first things we're going to do is go to Photoshop, and we're going to browse in Bridge today. So File, Browse in Bridge. Go ahead and expand my bridge, and you can see that there's quite a few different files. You can use your slider down here at the bottom, which will help you see what we've got going on. The first one we're going to start with is this red eye. So you see we're going to work on cleaning up and changing her just a little bit. So let's go ahead and grab the red eye start, double click and open her up. So it's a fair picture, but because we have Photoshop, we have the tools. There's no reason for you to turn in photos that have not been that are not the best quality. So before we start, let's go File, Save As, and we're going to call this red eye instead of Start. We're going to call it red eye Working, and we want to save it as a PSD, not a JPEG. So make sure you do your drop down and do PSD. Go ahead and push save. We can go ahead and grab our zoom tool. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can see her eyes. Clearly we don't want to have that going on. We've got a really easy way to fix that with the red eye tool. Go ahead over to your tools bar, and about 4th or 5th one down over by spot healing, you'll find one that says red eye tool. So red eye tool, we can change the pupil size, we can change the darken amount. So let's go ahead, change the pupil size to 23%. And the darken amount to 62. Then all we have to do is go over the eye, click on the pupil, click, and we get that red eye corrected, which makes life a lot nicer. Sometimes you might need to try it in a few different places in order to get it to work right. So it's getting better, but the image is still pretty dark, so there's a few things we can do in order to make it brighter. One of the first things we can do is you can play with your auto. So if you go to Image, there's an auto tone, there's an auto contrast, there's an auto color. So those are some easy ways to start if you just want some real basic things. I'm going to go back to my red eye. So sometimes that's not a bad place to start. Let's go ahead and go to the adjustments layers and choose our curves, which is the one that looks like an S. And we can go ahead and play with that a little bit more. And we want to go ahead and try to hit auto. And you'll see it brightened up just a little tiny bit. If you do Control Z, you can kind of see what it did. So that's one way to do it. We can also reset it. Let's try something else. Oh, we have to reapply it. We can say reset, and instead we can do select on the image adjustment button, which is this little finger here, right here, and we can click on her forehead and drag up and see how we can change that curve as well. So there's a couple different ways to do it. Let's go ahead and right click on our curves layer, flatten that image, and do a Control S to save. So it's a relatively easy, simple fix. So there's a few other things we can do. We can adjust her facial features with something called Liquify. Now this may or may not work depending on how your computer is set up. You need to go to Image and Preferences, go to Performance, and make sure this one says Use Graphics Processor is checked, otherwise this is not going to work. And let's say OK. So what we're going to do is go to Filter and Liquify. We're going to get a pop-up And we've got a few different things going on. We've got this one called Face Aware Liquify. So let's go ahead and start with her eyeballs. And notice we can do things. We've got our make the same or make different. Remember, we've got our little link here. So we're going to go ahead and say, let's make her eyes 32. And notice how her eyes then just popped up just a little tiny bit. I'm going to go ahead and lock it so it makes both eyes 32. You can use the sliders and change the size of her eyeballs pretty easily. Clearly we're not going for creepy eyes, so let's go ahead and stick to that 32. Alright, let's go ahead and for the height for that, let's go ahead and make it 10. So you can see we kind of have, turn that on, let's turn this to 10. You can see how you can change the eyeball height a little bit. Go ahead and put on 10. Alright, let's go ahead, shrink eyes, and go to mouth. Under mouth, we can actually play with her smile. So we can use this slider here and turn her into smiley or non-smiley person, which is a little bit weird, but kind of cool. So let's go ahead and give her a slight smile at 5. And let's make her mouth height 9. So obviously you can see how it makes her lips a little bit poutier, a little bit wider. So let's go ahead and make her 9. Alright, so let's go ahead and close that. Let's go ahead and look at face shape. And with her face shape we can change the size of her jawline. We can change the width of her face. So look how easy it is to manipulate all those different elements. They want us to go ahead and make her jawline 40. So we're going to make her gain some weight. And her face width is going to be 50. So we've made her a whole lot wider. Alright, so if we hit preview, back and forth, you can see the differences that we've created in that document. Alright, let's go ahead and play and say OK. Now notice that Face Liquify only works on when you have actual faces. We're going to go ahead and save this one, and you're going to turn in her. Next thing we're going to work on is playing with a blur for the background. So let's go ahead and go File, Browse and Bridge. This time we're going to look at this egret. So let's look at the egret start and stop and finish, the end. So if you notice the end one has this blurred background, we're going to work on how to do that. So let's go to Photoshop. We want File, Open as Smart Object. Smart objects allow us to manipulate the image without truly making it destructive editing, which is pretty nice. So we want the egret start, which is right here, and open. We're going to go ahead and do File, Save As. We're going to do egret working, and once again we want it to be a PSD, and say OK. So how are we going to do this? We're going to go ahead and go to Filter. We want the Blur Gallery, and we want an Iris Blur. And we're going to get this oval that shows up. So we're going to drag this center pin over top of the bird, because that's kind of what we want to stay in focus. We can then use our selection tools to change the size of that egret and round the blur around it. If you hit Alt, you can move in these feather points so you can determine just how you can do one at a time, you can do multiple at a time. So you see how it's creating that field of blurriness. So probably want his beak to be in focus. Alright, so we're going to go ahead, we can change the amount of the blur if you click on here. You can also adjust it right over here. So we only want it to be about 5. And we're going to say, okay, we like that. So we're going to hit OK right up here at the top. And we now have our blurred bird and our other. Because we have the smart filter, we can actually hide and turn that off pretty easily. See how when you turn the eyeball on and off, it makes it easy to turn things, make things not permanent. So if you're just checking something out. Alright, let's go ahead and save and go ahead and close that one. The next one we're going to do is to create a panorama. So let's go File, Browse and Bridge. We want to go up to this folder called Files for Panorama. And you notice that we've got all these different images, but we want to create one single image. So we're going to go ahead and look at the previews. So we've got that. Let's go back to Photoshop. Let's go back to Photoshop. Alright, let's go to File, and down here at the bottom says Automate, and we want Photo Merge. It's going to say, okay, what do you want to merge? So we need to use Files, and we want to browse. Go to this Files for Panorama. I'm going to click on the first one, I'm going to shift, and I'm going to click on the last one so that I get all of those images at once. So now it's going to load all 4 of those. I'm going to make sure that I'm on perspective and that I have checked all of these boxes down here at the bottom. So we're trying to tell it to do quite a few different things when we're blending these images together. And we're going to say OK. And this could take a little tiny bit. It's going to go through and look at all these images and line them up on top of each other. So it's still thinking, still doing its thing. So now I have one single image. And you can see how it has filled in, it's used content aware, it has created this single image for us, which is pretty awesome. So I'm going to do deselect, and I'm going to right click and merge visible, so I only get one layer to work with. Let's do a file, save as, and let's go ahead and call this skyline underscore working. And make sure it's a PSD, make sure it's in your lesson 5 folder. Alright, and push save. So there's a few other things that we can do to this. Let's go ahead and brighten it up just a little bit. We can do that with an adjustment layer. Let's go over here to our adjustments on the right. We want to go ahead and grab the levels, which is the second histogram in right here. What we're going to do is grab this white eyedropper and tell it that this is what we consider white, the clouds right here. So notice how the whole thing got a lot brighter. So that's much better. So let's go ahead and say save. And we've created that panorama. Now, what else can we do with it? We need to crop it and straighten it out just a little bit. So let's go ahead and flatten what we have so far. So we've got that adjustment layer added in. Let's go to our crop tool. And if you notice our horizon is a little bit crooked, we want to go ahead and straighten that out just a little bit. So let's go ahead and grab our straighten and draw a line along our coastline. And notice how now we have a much straighter coastline, which works much better. Now you can use your arrow keys, nudge up and down, and determine where exactly you want to crop this. If we look at the bottom, you're going to notice right down in here that we lost part of the bar. We clearly don't want to have that as part of our picture, so we're going to make sure that that is cropped out as we're putting this together. When we're happy with it, go ahead and say OK. So now we can't tell that we have that bar that was missing, and we've got a nice flat horizon. And that's all we have to do for the panorama. Relatively simple. File, save as, make sure it's your working, that's in your file, and save. Let's go ahead and replace it. Let's go ahead and close that one. Next thing we're going to do is correct an image distortion. So let's go to File, Browse and Bridge, blow my bridge up. I'm going to go back out to my Lesson 5 folders, and let's go ahead and look at this columns before and after. So if you'll notice, column start, it's really round because it was taken with the wrong lens, and we want it to be nice and straight. And we can fix that pretty easily in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and double click column start. Let's go to a file, save as, and we want columns working, and save. Alright, so now what we're going to do is go to filter, go down to lens correction. We want to make sure down here this show grid is turned on. We want to make sure over here that our auto scale image is turned on and that our edge is transparency. Then let's go up here and hit the custom tab. With custom, we can play with this remove distortion slider, and you'll notice as you slide it, you get much straighter columns. Let's go ahead and take them to about 52. And if you want to, you can do that by hand, or you can do it with the tool, either way. Alright, I am happy with that, so I'm going to say OK. So now if I do Control Z a couple times, I can see just how much I've managed to straighten out that picture. So it looks much better. So let's do File and Save and close that one. Alright, so this one we're going to extend the depth of field. So let's go to File, Browse and Bridge. Let's go ahead and go down here to our glass start and glass end. So you're going to notice in glass end, both the wine glass and the beach house are in focus. But if you notice at start, the beach house is in focus, but the glass is not. So we're going to play with those files to create an image so both elements are in focus. Let's go ahead and double click glass start. Let's do File, Save As, Glass Working, .psd, and push Save. So from the Layers panel, we can see in this one the glass is in focus, but the beach house is not. If I hit Beach, the beach house is in focus, but the glass is not. And I want to get a combination of both of those. So how can we do that? Let's go ahead and shift click both layers. So we're going to click beach, we're going to hit shift and hit glass. So we're grabbing them both at once. We want to go to edit, and we want to tell it to auto align the layers. So it's going to go ahead and try and figure out how to line those up. Let's go ahead and tell it to do auto. We want to make sure that vignette removal is taken off and geometric distortion is turned off. And we're going to say OK. So it's going to go ahead and stack those on top of each other. But it's still not quite right. You'll notice that we've got still an out of focus and an in focus. Let's go to edit. Go down here to auto blend layers. And we want to go ahead and tell it to stack the images. We want seamless tones, but we do want the content aware to be turned off. And we're going to say OK. And it's going to do its magic and create a situation where both the wine glass and the beach house are now in focus. We can do a file save and close out of that one. So these are all just a lot of really quick, easy fixes that you can be making. Let's go File, Browse and Bridge, and let's go ahead and look at the ducks. You'll notice in the ducks we've got the duck is really far behind in this one, but in our end he has been moved over here. So we're going to go ahead and move that duck. Let's go ahead and grab the duck start JPEG. Now this is not a great quality photo to begin with. You can tell it's all kind of out of focus and it's not one I would play with, but it's what we're given. Let's do File, Save As, and we want ducks working in our class, on our 5 folder, and say OK. Oh, but it's telling me JPEG and I want to save it as a PSD. So let's go back, File, Save As, ducks working, and this time I remember to change to Photoshop, and save. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and grab my Content Aware tool, which is by the red eye. It's like 2 little crossed arrows. And what I'm going to do is I want to move something. I don't want to extend it, I want to move it. And I want the structure to be about 3. And the color to be 0. So then I'm going to draw a marquee around my duck that I want to move. Notice this does not have to be perfect, just has to be complete so you get the whole thing in there. For now I'm going to drag my duck over kind of where I want to put him, in here with the other ducks. And when I like it, when I think he's where I want, I'm going to go ahead and push check. And look how it magically moved the duck over here and corrected the grass in the other spot. So it's a really easy way to do things. Now you could change your structure up here on the slider while it's still selected and see how it changes. Notice how the grass changes a whole bunch. I want it to be kind of moderate, so I'm going to leave it on 3, and it changed this area right in here. So I'm going to go ahead and deselect, and I've moved my duck. So I'm going to File and Control S and save that guy. Alright, let's close our ducks and play with some trains. Let's go File, Browse and Bridge, and this time we're going to work with, where'd the trains go? This bridge. Just notice that bridge, see them side by side. This bridge, the train is floating up off the train tracks, and in the end we get it onto the train tracks. So we're going to play with some warps in order to adjust that perspective. So let's go ahead and grab that bridge start. And you'll notice that we've got 2 layers. We've got a train layer and we've got a background layer. So we've obviously taken 2 separate images and we're trying to combine them together. Let's do File, Save As, Bridge, Working, .psd, and push Save. Alright, so we want to play with the perspective. So we're going to go to Edit, and we want to play with Perspective Warp, which is about halfway down. It's going to open up a image for us. And we want to go ahead and we're going to draw 2 different squares that help decide what is the perspective on this train. So I'm going to click and hold and draw a perspective around this first part. And I can take and grab my grabbers here so that I have a pretty good idea what is the perspective of this train. Then I'm going to go ahead and draw a second one around the front part, so I kind of have a better idea of what is the train doing. And you can always play with those a little bit. The next thing we're going to do, now that we've drawn those pins around, we're going to go ahead and do warp up here, and we want the 3 lines that are side by side. From here we can manipulate these handles and change the perspective of our train altogether. So now we can actually have him sitting on the train tracks the way he belongs, which is pretty amazing. Alright, when I'm happy with it, I'm going to go ahead and push the check mark. Now if I decide, okay, it doesn't quite look right, I want to play with a little more, I can double click back in my perspective warp, go back in, and I can adjust those layers and those dots a little bit more till I get the perspective that I really want. And commit, check. So perspective warp is a lot of fun. You can do a lot of great things with it. If you do Control Z, that'll show you the one before. So that's all you need to do for this lesson. It's relatively simple and straightforward. Make sure you do a Control S to save the train. So you're actually going to be uploading several different elements for this one. You need the bridge, you need the ducts, the glass, the columns, the skyline, the egret, and the red eye. So you're uploading multiple documents. I'm fine if you upload them all separately, or you can put them all together in one folder, zip them, and upload them that way. That's all for this one.